what is in this short time, what has stood out to you about what they're bringing right now?
Yeah, I mean they are a great football team. Certainly, you look at them offensively, they're going to have games where they score 50 points just with their size. I mean, extremely electric across the board, especially when you look at their backs and their receivers. And then having a veteran quarterback, too. And then defensively, nobody's played better defense than they have in the nation thus far.
You were mentioning kind of doing some pad-on-pad, some live practices out there. A lot's been made of their front four, their front five, front even seven. Was it a case of really kind of working on those blocks and trying to maybe work on some outside moves from an offensive standpoint to try to counter their size?
They do have excellent size, and yet what's really impressive is just watching their pad level and the way that they play. And, guys that, I don't think ever in the history of the Air Force Academy we've ever played an opponent that had this many 4- and 5-star recruits. They're they're well prepared. I mean, just a terrific football team. But up front, their size is a real challenge, most certainly.
Well, you kind of talked about Worthman's maturity or development of the offense. I guess what else has stood out to you about just his understanding of the offense and him playing under center?
Well, I think, the value of time. He's been here now nearly 3 years, or at least going into his third season. And, I think you naturally accrue a little more football education, what to do with certain plays, and probably more than anything else is being able to recognize bad plays, whether it's before the snap or actually during the play itself, and knowing how to minimize a real problem. And I think there's a talent in that regard too.
Headed to Ann Arbor, going to the Big House, one of the big historic stadiums. You guys were there just 5 years ago. Have any other memories of just Michigan football and Schnellenberger and just the history and of playing Michigan growing up as a fan of college football as you are?
Well, I think the one guy coached at Miami. I think for who you mentioned, the Miami of Florida too. Yeah, Schembechler, Coach Schembechler, he worked at a Miami also, Miami of Ohio, in addition to Michigan. I mean, great place. I'll say this, one of the neat experiences 20 years ago when while working at Ohio University was to work their camp each summer. And, just splendid environment, how much football meant, the guidance and the discipline that you were able to provide to young kids. It's one of those things you kind of look back and say, God, how lucky we were to get a chance to spend a week in June up there at their camp.
Coach, some of your coaching peers in this state always speak in awe of when they have an opportunity to play a game like this. I've never heard anything like that out of you or your predecessor. There's never been an awe. Is that because of the maturity level of your players, or what?
No, yeah, I think for us it's absolute respect, for our opponent. And and that's the way we operate each game. Certainly, this week too.
Have you any background with Jim Harbaugh? When you were in the pros and now?
Not really, no, sir.
When you look at an offense like theirs, last year I think the balance was something like 213 yards a game rushing, 210 passing. When you see that kind of balance, how do you begin to game plan?
No doubt, and I think that's one of the things offensively that is so impressive. I don't know if there's anybody in college football over the last 2.5 years that you can truly see does a better job of being quite balanced, being able to run the ball between the tackles and also being extremely effective on the perimeter too, with fly sweeps, toss sweeps, in addition to being in good plays and being able to get the ball down the field with their passing game. They're superb on offense. You look up front. I said a little bit earlier. I don't think in the history of the Air Force Academy we've never played a team that's had this many 4- and 5-star recruits. They're just and to see, I think especially 2 years ago that recruiting class they had. The number of sophomores that they have. offensively and then defensively. I think they have something like 7 starters on defense from that recruiting class. Quite frankly, the first thing that went off in my mind was one year there was a basketball class that had like 5 starters. It was like, I want to say it was like Jackson and King and Jawan Howard and Jalen Rose and Chris Webber one year. A school had that. These guys have that, and it shows.
And as a passer, how would you kind of evaluate what Wilton Speight or Speight? I don't even know how to say.
Yeah, I mean, excellent player. He was last year too. I mean, quite frankly, if you said, hey, last season who were the 5 best teams in college football, they were certainly one of them. And this year they're even more talented. And I think all 3 of the tailbacks are strong contributors. You look at whether it's yards per carry, whatever metric you want to use, the depth and the size of their offensive line and their movement, and then, incredibly explosive at wide receiver too. So, I think sometimes you can use the word great about a football team. Very high-quality group.